The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for our Still in Motion Photography webinar with Cody Rich. My name is Sai and I'll be your host today. Some housekeeping items before we move ahead. On your screen to the left is the GoToWebinar viewer, through which you'll see the presentation. To the right is the GoToWebinar control panel, where you can select an audio mode and ask questions. Our presentation today will last for about 40 minutes, after which we'll be open for Q&A. Most importantly, this webinar will be recorded and sent to you via email in 48 hours. Last but not the least, I'd like to mention that Cody will be showing us a few videos in his presentation today, and you might experience a little bit of a lag or jitter depending on your internet speeds and GoToWebinar server speeds. Unfortunately, this is beyond our control and a request. We want to please bear with us if you do see a little lag there. With the housekeeping items aside, let's move on to the webinar. We're privileged to have Cody Rich as a presenter today. Cody is one of our most esteemed Extreme Team members and an Nikon USA ambassador. Cody is a world traveler and a true storyteller, and we're very excited to have him share with us his assignments and shed some light into his motion and still photography techniques. With no further ado, I'll hand it to Cody, who will take us through the presentation.
Great, thank you, Sai. I appreciate it, and thanks everyone for tuning in this morning. What I really thought I would talk about this morning is the career path that I've taken over the last really from the beginning of my photography career, but how it really transformed and accelerated from the launch of video-enabled DSLR cameras, and how the ability to capture video content simultaneously alongside still photography has really transformed not just the careers of still photographers and filmmakers, but really it's been a piece of transforming the way we communicate and tell stories as a society, whether that's in a theater, or whether that's in print, or whether that's online. And that's really the essence of what we're going to discuss today, with some tales from the field and really just the story of my path. I like to say that I'm an adventure photographer and filmmaker. At least that's where I really sharpened my teeth. I fell in love with photographing rock climbing when I was 13 years old, and picked up a camera so that I could actually make storytelling pictures of those climbing adventures so that I could bring them back to school on a Monday morning and share those images with my friends. And now, I hate to date myself here, I'm 38 years old now, and so you can do the math. That's a lot of years of holding a camera in my hand, looking through that viewfinder. But what I found is that in my heart, it's still what I'm the most passionate about when I'm working in these outdoor adventure environments. But I also learned that the skill sets I learned while photographing the adventure world apply to other genres of storytelling. Today, a small portion of my time is actually spent photographing adventure sports, but I'm telling a lot of motion stories for anything from Fortune 500 companies to shooting advertising campaigns that might not be adventure content. But what I learned is by photographing, for example, this image of Beth Rodden, if you can learn how to make pictures in challenging environments, this is a challenging environment, it means that when you can finally put your feet firmly on the ground indoors and focus all of your energy exclusively on storytelling and the technical attributes of the equipment you're working with, you can really elevate your game. But I realized early on that what separated me from the pack, and I think this applies to everyone, is when you are an expert at a subject matter. For me, I broadened my expertise beyond just photographing the world of rock climbing. I'm an expert at being outside. I like being outside in beautiful outdoor adventure environments, working with athletes that are good at what they do, that are world-class at what they do, or just passionate about what they do. This is photographing snowboarding in Lake Tahoe, California, my home. I'm always up for a challenge. This is photographing underwater cave exploration in the Yucatan Peninsula. It's one of the most wild forms of exploration. These guys are literally going into unexplored terrain, caves, underwater with no light. This picture was made as we entered the cenote, and this is the algae, the orange algae with the sun filtering through it. But when you have an expertise, my expertise, one of one of which is hanging off of a rope and feeling very comfortable in those environments, or getting into adventure environments and being uncomfortable, going into situations that are unfamiliar, but finding a calm in those environments where I can really switch gears and focus on the creative process is sort of my sweet spot. You know, that applies to photographing rock climbing, it applies to photographing in the mountains when it's snow covered, it applies to this image of a cenote diver, a cave diver in the Yucatan Peninsula. And so that tends to be the type of phone call that I get from clients, is when they need somebody to go to far off places and tell stories where you don't get to stay in a 5-star hotel or even in a bed, but I spend a lot of time in tents, or over the years I've spent a lot of time in tents, where keeping your camera gear dry and keeping the morale up amongst the athletes that you're traveling with becomes one of the key ingredients. This was a surf trip along the coast of California. It's called the Lost Coast of California. It's a 30-mile stretch of coastline with no interruption by road. So it's a spectacular coastline. But that means, as a storyteller, as a photographer, I was carrying all of my equipment on my back, all of my food, my tent, anything that I needed for the 5 days or so that we were in the field. And I really love that type of storytelling. I'm saying all of this so that you understand my roots and where I come from. You know, for me, at the end of the day, storytelling is about making compelling moments that move people. I oftentimes feel like if I haven't shot photographs in a duration of time, I just want subjects to photograph. I don't care whether that's kids having fun outdoors or whether that's adults pushing the limits of exploration. For me, it's really about making images that meet the criteria of a great photograph in the photography world, which comes down to a few guiding principles: great light, great composition, and great moment. And then you put me in a situation. I like to think that if I'm put in a situation where I'm with interesting people in a beautiful environment and I'm just given time, because time is a key factor, you know, I love the process of making compelling images that will move people. Now, I'm not a hugely technical guy. I'm not the person that you would call and ask the technical details of any specific Nikon camera. I can't recite how many megapixels or the frame rate, you know, how many frames per second necessarily, or the updates in autofocus systems on a camera. That's just not me. I'm much more interested in the creative process, the actual act of going out there and making content, making pictures. But there's one piece of equipment that really transformed my life and my career. And I think this photograph that my good friend Mike Corrado from Nikon shot of me using a slider really represents that change. And that was the introduction of video into a DSLR camera. So the Nikon D90 hit the market 6 years or so ago. And I was actually flying across the United States reading Time magazine. And there was a one-page technology column. And for the life of me, I can't remember the author's name. I should probably look it up. But what he said in this one-page article was fascinating. He said there's a new camera on the market, the Nikon D90, that's going to transform filmmaking forever. And I went on to read the piece, and he clearly was not a photographer. He wasn't a filmmaker. He was a technology writer that could take that from 10,000 foot above view on the technology world and really understand and forecast or predict the ramifications. And what he said in this article was that this new camera, this Nikon D90, allowed a photographer, a filmmaker, to create cinematic, sexy, shallow depth of field footage that looked like Hollywood footage, but using this small form factor and relatively inexpensive camera. I didn't need a lot of persuading after reading this article. I had for years been dabbling with building multimedia shows where I would take my still photographs and put an audio track behind them. I bought camcorders along the way, but I was always so disappointed in either the post-production process or when experimenting with camcorders, the look of that video content was just awful. I mean, it looked like home video. So I got off the plane at my home airport in Reno, Nevada, and I drove to Costco, or maybe I ordered it online, but I, as quickly as possible, tried to get my hands on a Nikon D90. And The next day, one of my very close friends, Josh Lowell, who owns a production company called Big Up Productions, he's one of the greatest filmmakers in the rock climbing world. Josh called and he said, "Hey Corey, I could really use your help shooting a segment for a documentary film that we're doing in Yosemite Valley." And what he asked me to do, again, was go and exercise my expertise. He wanted me to go and spend a few days with Tommy Caldwell, one of the greatest climbers on the planet today, documenting Tommy trying to free climb the longest, hardest rock climb in the world. And just to be clear, free climbing doesn't mean climbing without a rope. It means climbing without the help of the equipment, meaning he's not pulling on the equipment, he's only using his hands and feet to ascend the wall. And so I thought, absolutely. First of all, I love being in Yosemite and hanging on the wall, and this is right up my alley in terms of the types of stories that I like to tell. But then I pitched Josh, and to qualify this, Josh is a guy that grew up in a family of filmmakers. It's in his blood. His dad's an Academy Award-winning filmmaker. Josh himself has won an Emmy, so has his brother Brett Lowell, for their filmmaking skills. And so here I am, the still photographer that has almost no experience in the video world, and I start pitching Josh over the phone on why I should shoot this entire segment using this new Nikon D90 camera, because it's going to allow us to capture cinematic footage. And while I couldn't see his face, I could hear him heckling my pitch, and with some serious doubt in his mind, he said, I think just to humor me, he said, "Sure, Corey, why don't you bring the Nikon D90 with you, but I'm also going to send a real glorified camcorder, more robust production-style video capture device up on the wall with you, and try to shoot with that, and if you want to experiment with the D90, go for it." And the reality is that video camera that he sent along just didn't look good. It was that same problem. It was everything was in focus all the time, and I found myself, being a still photographer, switching into video mode on the D90 and shooting just about everything on that D90. Now, I knew I was rolling the dice. The last thing I wanted to do was, not deliver the goods, because at the end of the day, that's really our job as filmmakers, is to make sure we deliver the goods. So you're looking at 4 photographs shot during that trip. My job was really shoot still photographs, but also, more importantly, capture the motion content and the storytelling elements that would help move the narrative along in Josh's final documentary film project. And so what I thought I would do, this was really my very first experiment using the Nikon D90. And keep in mind, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have a tripod with a fluid head. Not that it would have helped that much in a vertical environment. I did not own an ND filter. I had no external microphone. I had a Nikon D90, and I had my standard set of lenses, which I believe I had a 17 to 35 millimeter 2.8 lens and a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 lens, both Nikkor glass. So watch this from the perspective of, the first experiment. I would change a lot, but the key is everybody starts somewhere, and you don't need all of that extraneous equipment to have your first experience shooting video. So here we go. It's about 2 minutes long, and if this doesn't show up well, if it's jittery, you can also watch this on my website, CoreyRich.com. Yeah, and later Nikon published this on their Learn and Explore website.
El Cap is the most sustained, steepest wall in the world of that size, and this project goes right up the middle of it. This thing is just so far above and beyond anything I've been able to do, and I put so much work into it. It's a daunting task, but yet it's amazing. It's the next step. It's the progression forward in big wall free climbing.
Chili burritos, black.
Tonight, once we spot around 55. Friday, 30% chance grade with a 9-year
every year, even if I don't think I'm going to come back, I find myself here thinking about this project and up there on the wall suffering once again. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I love it.
So you get a taste of what I was able to capture up there. And really I was applying all of the same rules and skills that I had acquired as a still photographer. I was shooting wide shots to establish the scene. I was shooting medium shots and then details. Details, for example, of Tommy grabbing those little holds. And it was just so exciting. I found myself, in fact, I didn't shoot enough still photography. That was one of the critiques that Josh later passed on. He said, hey, I thought you were going to shoot stills as well. And the reality is I was so excited shooting all of the video that I just got carried away. And it was like getting bit by that bug again, that same bug that bit me at 13 years old, which was to take pictures. I had now, where I was starting that transition into falling in love with the world of filmmaking, of storytelling through motion. So a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, you know, this is pretty cool that I can do this with a Nikon camera. And I'm familiar with the form factor, but I realized it would be great to have a tripod with a fluid head. I wanted to be able to shoot shallow depth of field midday, so buying an ND filter. The sound quality wasn't great on El Capitan, so I bought an ME1 microphone, a Nikon ME1 external. I guess then there was no ME1. It was some other external microphone that I could put in the hot shoe. And then this light bulb went off in my head that I wonder if I could pitch one of my commercial clients on trying to shoot simultaneously still and video on one production and test this concept of could I really parallel still and motion. So Roadrunner Sports, which is a long-time client of mine, Roadrunner Sports is one of the largest catalog and web shoe distribution and apparel companies in the running world. Anyone that ran cross-country or track in high school probably still gets their catalog. And so we had a 4-day shoot planned in both San Diego and Colorado, and you're seeing a few of the still photographs. And I really had that down. I'd probably done 24 Roadrunner shoots at this point. So I knew what we needed. It was creative, cool, interesting running photographs and some of the before and after running that really showed off the apparel but also the shoes. And so I pitched the creative director at the time on, can we do an experiment? Can I actually, I promise I'll make the focus the still photography, and then after we shoot the still photographs, I'm just going to switch the same camera into video mode, press record, and have the runner run past one more time. So I want to show you, and they agreed to do it. And this isn't a complex narrative. It's just some cool visuals. But it was an experiment to see if, is this possible? Did it really make sense to have a set of still images and video that came out of the same camera from the same production so that there was a continuity. So here's just a 30-second experimental spot that we cut for Roadrunner Sports, shot over 4 days in Colorado and San Diego.
I love running because all you need is tops and a pair of shoes and open road.
So it was really cool. I think some great visuals, and you could see the difference that by actually adding a tripod and an ND filter and thinking a little bit more about video, you know, it's kind of the film school student techniques of I sat on the back of a bicycle and we shot a runner as we ran down a path. We upped our game. It was myself and Brett Wilhelm, a good friend of mine, just the two of us in the field, and between the two of us we captured all of that footage or supported one another capturing that footage with the D90. And now that spot never saw the light of day, but I showed that spot and I never got paid for it. And it was an experiment that a client was willing to allow me to do. You know, it never cut into the deliverable that I was really getting hired to accomplish, which was the still photography. But I like to say it all the time that the best opportunities in life are born out of doing it out of passion. You know, for me in the beginning it was photographing rock climbing. It's something I wanted to do. It was in my heart. It wasn't about making money. I never set out to make photography, for that matter. I never set out to make photography my business. It happened because I loved doing it and I did it a lot. Video is very much that same thing. I never intended for this to become a path or a big part of my career, but it just happened because I loved doing it and I made the time to shoot personal projects or piggyback video on commercial shoots. So at that point, I'm doing as much video as I possibly can, and Nikon is quickly rolling out better cameras. It was the D90, then I think it was the D300S, then the D7000, and then eventually they rolled out the Nikon D4, and I got a very special phone call from Tokyo, and it was Nikon corporate in Tokyo had called, and they gave me the kind of the greatest assignment of my life, my video career at that point, and the pitch was, we're going to give you a blank white canvas, and we're rolling out this new camera, which is the Nikon D4. This was, of course, after I signed a bunch of non-disclosure agreements. They then revealed that they were talking about their new flagship camera, the Nikon D4, and there were a couple of amazing attributes. The D4 actually would allow you to record and monitor sound simultaneously and adjust input levels. Now, that wasn't possible on a DSLR at the time. So they gave me the freedom to tell whatever story I wanted, and I decided to put together a film called Why, and it was going to explore the minds of 3 elite adventure athletes and really get into their heads and try to figure out why they do what they do, how they push it to the limit, and what drives them day to day. And as photographers and as filmmakers, I think that's something that we can all relate to. It's what's that driving force between everything that we do? What's the real motivator? Now, I'm not going to show you the film because it's 7 minutes long, or just about 7 minutes long, but I would encourage everyone that's interested in either the adventure athlete world or the adventure world, the filmmaking world, or just in the progression of how one's career or skill set evolves as a filmmaker. I'm showing you these stepping stone projects. I would encourage you to go to my website, coryrich.com, and watch the film Why. It's under the motion section. And I think what was important about this project is I was able to leverage, these are a few behind-the-scenes photographs from the film Why. I was able to leverage those skill sets that are unique to me, and it's about that expertise. What makes you unique? What separates you from the pack? And in my case, I started my career by hanging on ropes, photographing rock climbing. I've always been interested in the adventure world, getting inside of the minds of great athletes. I love the relationship part of working in the adventure world. I'm not just working with athletes with a number on their back that I'll never meet. In fact, I travel on planes, trains, automobiles, share tents with these athletes. So when I selected the athletes, it was a really hand-picked group of people. Dane Jackson, who's pictured in this photograph, and you can see me hanging off the rope, utilizing my skill set, is going over a waterfall. And by utilizing those unique sets of skills or that expertise that we each have, that allows us to make more compelling, interesting images. I understand the sports world. I know Dane well. I've watched him grow up. The first time I met Dane, he was just a young kid. He must have been 10 years old. He's now 22 years old and one of the most decorated kayakers in the world, from the Jackson kayak family, the kind of the royalty, the dynasty of kayaking. But that skill set, that knowledge, and that experience allowed me to make the phone call to Dane, convince him to be a part of our project, and then it allowed me to put myself into unique situations or unique positions to make interesting photographs, and that's what it's really all about. You know, I'm going to pause this for a second. So one of the decisions that I made, we had 2 deliverables really to Nikon. One deliverable was we needed to produce an interesting short film. That's the 7-minute film Why. But in addition, we needed to produce a behind-the-scenes video that would really show off and share all of the techniques that we were utilizing and the journey behind the scenes of what it takes to put together a film like Why. Now, I also had a hand-picked crew of guys. I think there were 7 of us total, including my wife. Actually, I take that back. I wasn't married at the time. But there were 7 of us that traveled on this project. No, that is true. I'm sorry. I'm losing track of time. But there were 7 of us that traveled on this project, including my wife. And one of the things that we realized on this project, that in the video world, getting the camera into incredibly unique positions is what separates a short film or differentiates a short film from being good to potentially great, and keeping that camera moving. That's a distinct difference between the video world and the still photography world. As still photographers, we're looking for that one decisive moment. And in the motion world, we're really looking to have the camera floating all the time. And so we made a big commitment, I made a big commitment to bring a remote-controlled helicopter, a radio-controlled helicopter on the road with us. And this was very early on in the whole drone world. So Mike Hagedorn and Rex Lint, you can see them both in this video grab. Mike is the farthest from the camera, and Mike is really the brains behind the operation. Mike now works for one of the leading organizations in the RC heli world and drone world, Free Fly, and they also were the creators of the Movi. And then Rex Lint, a good friend, one of the camera operators, and one of my compatriots in all of the adventures in the filmmaking world. Rex is also standing there operating the camera. So I'm going to show you a little behind-the-scenes clip from the making of Why. And you know, you always have to keep in check that when you're pushing the limits, occasionally you push too far. I really wanted tons of camera movement, so we brought Mike and his heli along for the entire trip. We tried to be methodical and safe about each shot, but on day 2 we pushed it a little too far.
We're going to take it away. Heli down. You're safe, Mike. Way to keep it out of the water.
The camera made it. The chopper's mostly intact. It'll live to fly another day. Yeah.
So, you know, that's just part of the game. We're always trying to push it. We're always trying to get the camera into new situations. So that was Veracruz, Mexico for kayaking, and then we actually went to Joshua Tree National Park with Alex Honnold. You might recognize this guy, one of the most recognized and talented rock climbers of our time. Alex has really made a name for himself climbing without a rope. And so, of course, I'm always thinking about how do I get the camera into unique positions and how do I leverage my skill set. You know, the most challenging part about being next to Alex on this wall is, you know, he's not attached to a rope and he's 50 feet off of the ground, and you can see that landing wouldn't be good. And so it's again leveraging. I know how to hang on a wall. I know how to communicate with athletes. So we're having a constant dialogue, Alex and I, around, you know, 1, I don't want him to push himself beyond his comfort zone, and 2, as a photographer, I know that I need to stay out of his way and not accidentally roll onto him and knock him off of the wall. And so on this project, we had 3 prototype D4 cameras. The third athlete was Rebecca Rush. Her nickname is the Queen of Pain, another of my great friends. We've traveled the world together on different projects. And Rebecca is famous for being able to push herself aerobically longer and harder than most people alive, male or female. So one of the things that I like to do is always choose locations that are a great backdrop because you're stacking the cards in your favor. And that's exactly what we did on this film. So I'm going to kind of move past Why and the D4, but I would encourage you again to go to my website, watch Why, the film, and watch the behind the scenes of Why, both projects on our website, and you'll see an enormous amount of, there's an enormous amount of insight to be gleaned. You know, a lot of it is watching us make mistakes and figure it out. And I think that, I hope that's a real takeaway from this webinar, is that everybody starts from zero, and we're constantly learning. I mean, anyone that tells you, they have it dialed is lying to them. And today, many motion projects into this game, and many still photo shoots into this career. I make mistakes constantly and learn from those mistakes, and that's part of the evolution of evolving. That's part of the evolving as a filmmaker, as a creative. So every project leads to the next project. They're stepping stones because we're gaining experience, and hopefully if the projects are done well, lots of people are seeing those projects. And that was exactly the case with Why. That camera was a pretty special camera in the marketplace when it rolled out. The timing was perfect. It was the first HDSLR, video-enabled DSLR camera that allowed us to control audio, record audio, and monitor that sound simultaneously. So launching an interesting video for Nikon that was actually storytelling with people talking, not just a music video style launch video was a big deal, so it got a lot of traffic. And I'd like to also believe that as a team, as a small footprint production, we captured some pretty interesting footage. So in short order, 1 million plus people had watched the film Y online, and almost an equal number of people had gone to the behind-the-scenes video and watched it online. So Nikon was happy, we were ecstatic, and very soon after, a telephone call came in from an ad agency representing the state of New Mexico. And it was a really interesting phone call. They said, Corey, the film Y was great, but we enjoyed the behind the scenes even more. And they said the reason we enjoyed it so much is it was obvious that you guys really have fun on production, that it's a collaborative effort. And they really hit the nail on the head. I've always been a believer in when you're building a team of people to work together, I'm looking for guys that are smarter than me, more talented than me, that will have fun in the field, better looking, funnier, all of it. Like when you're surrounded by people that are great at what they do and passionate, the entire project becomes better. And the ad agency said, Corey, what really sold us on you, and the reason we're calling, is that behind-the-scenes piece looked like so much fun. We want you to bring that same crew, same camera, same everything, and shoot 2 30-second television spots for the state of New Mexico. Now, the timing was pretty unique because the D4 had been announced, but no one could get their hands on D4s. And it sounds really funny, but I was part of the team that launched the D4. On the still photography side, Joe McNally, Bill Frakes, Matthias, I'm drawing a blank on Matthias's last name. There were a handful of us that worked on that project to launch the camera. And I couldn't get my hands on a camera. We gave the prototypes back, but they were so hot on the market that we just couldn't touch them. So here we have this big job on the horizon, shooting television spots for the state of New Mexico, and I can't get my hands on D4 cameras. So I call the folks at Nikon, and and at that point they launched the next camera, the Nikon D800. And somehow I managed to get my hands on 2 prototype, maybe they weren't prototype cameras, 2 early release D800s, because I think there was enough interest in trying to use a Nikon camera on a 30-second television spot for broadcast. So I want to show you the first of the 30-second spots. And what's important to realize when you're watching these spots is we were able to capture significantly more footage because of our small footprint production. We were the same 6 or 7 guys, including my wife Marina, in the field using tiny small form factor cameras, the D800 with our Nikkor glass, SanDisk memory inside of the cards, light and fast production model. You'll see we used lightweight aluminum jibs. We were using glide cams that were handheld, tripod, Manfrotto, carbon fiber tripods that were quick and dirty. We just moved fast so we could really fill our day to the brim. We cast real people. These were real families and a real couple from New Mexico. And so we threw all of the convention of how a Hollywood crew might do this out the window and did it the way that a photojournalist or a doc film crew would do it. So here's the first spot. Envision that the concept was a couple traveling through the state of New Mexico enjoying themselves. And this is shot in March. So part of the challenge was making it feel warm. Shot on 2 D800s.
True or false? There are only 2 things you have to agree on. Which way to go and where to stop. New Mexico. True.
So it was a super fun production. I mean, we for 4 days traveled around the state of New Mexico, and we had a very rough shot list. No storyboards, just a typed pages document, which were the shots we thought we needed to string together in order to make this 30-second spot. But we were also totally open-minded to the serendipity of being on the road, just the idea that things change while you're on the road, and you need to be open-minded and adaptable. For example, one of my favorite shots in the whole piece or scenes is the cool old, not old, but that really rustic-looking cowboy who's standing against the red wall and then dips his hat as the couple drives by in a Jeep. That was not planned. That we just happened to be in this tiny town and saw this guy walk by, wonderful guy, actually a talented artist, told him what we wanted to do, dreamed up a scenario, and 30 minutes later we had shot the scenario. And that's the beauty of small footprint production, using small cameras like the D800. I'm going to show you the second spot, just 30 seconds, shot over the same 4 days. We traveled with all 6 talents, so the couple as well as a family of 4. This wasn't a real family. I think we had combined kids and moms and dads to make sure that it was the right look and the right ages. But picture this first shot. It's about 20 degrees outside with about 15-mile-an-hour wind as we ask a family at sunrise to walk across this ridge line at sunrise so that the light is beautiful. So those are the challenges as a director on these projects. You know, the technical stuff, frankly, becomes almost secondary to really working with people. I mean, making people comfortable so that you can create the vision that you have for the spot. So here it is. This is a family traveling through the state of New Mexico.
We are all travelers. We seek experiences that are true and good and real. The question is, where do we go? Where will the people, the landscape, and culture touch our hearts? Where is the place that will speak to us in a voice that is familiar and kind? Where? New Mexico. True.
So again, a fun spot. You can see some overlap in terms of the locations that we used for the couple's spot and then this spot. Now, there was this really kind of amazing moment while shooting the New Mexico spots. If you've been through New Mexico, you realize it's a lot of tiny towns. And when I say tiny towns, it's a single gas station, a single restaurant, and maybe a motel in the town. And so as a crew, we were very small. We also had the representative from the state of New Mexico, the Secretary of Tourism, traveling with us, and we also had with us the folks from the ad agency and some local support, catering, and some drivers, etc., from New Mexico. So every night we would go to the same restaurant, and we'd all share food and sit at 3 or 4 tables. So we were eating Mexican food in one of the tiny towns in New Mexico, and sitting next to me was a couple of the guys on my crew, and then on my right was the Secretary of Tourism from the state of New Mexico. And I was trying to not eavesdrop on her conversation, but she was on her telephone clearly talking to a supervisor. And I'm trying to remain engaged in the crew conversation about what we're doing first thing the next morning, but I'm listening to really our client talk about the project, and I hear her say, yeah, it's really amazing. These guys are shooting on cameras that you can buy at Costco. And it was a little jarring. I thought, uh-oh, I don't know what she's saying or who she's talking to, but she said the incredible thing is the footage just looks amazing. And then at the end of the conversation, they switched subjects a few times. She gave a glowing report of how we were doing as a crew. She switched and finally ended the call by saying, okay, Mr. Governor, we'll talk to you soon. And it just struck me all at once that this is the future. We're living in the future. She just told the governor of the state of New Mexico that we're using cameras that you can buy at Costco, but they have a professional look to them, cinematic quality. And in the end, she was saying, Mr. Governor, you're saving the taxpayer money, and we're creating something that's as creative or more creative because we're adopting a modern approach to storytelling with motion. And I think that's really the point behind this entire seminar, is this idea that we're living in an amazing time, all of us, whether this is your career or whether it's a passion or a hobby or it's something that you do as a piece of your job in an organization. We've never been more empowered by the tools that are readily available to us. No longer is the playing field, getting onto the playing field, limited by the amount of money you can spend on equipment. Today, with just about any camera that you buy, whether it's a point and shoot or whether it's a DSLR camera, video-enabled DSLR, they're all video-enabled is the point, whether it's HD or full HD or 4K at this point. So I'm going to show you this last piece. I know I have 5 minutes of presenting left, and then we're going to switch to Q&A. But so every project leads to the next project. The state of New Mexico spots go online. We get another telephone call from an ad agency in Detroit. And I love these phone calls. You know, this is part of the world of photography and filmmaking. As a freelancer, is you never know what your next opportunity is. That's what makes it so exciting. Every day is different. And the phone rings, and it's Donor Advertising, an ad agency out of Detroit that really specializes in the automotive world. But they're representing a fabric company called Polar Tech out of the Northeast. And the idea is they want to go out and shoot 3 hero still photographs of rock climbing, skiing, and glacier travel. And they want to do an accompanying video spot. Now they want the overlap so that the visuals it's obvious that the visuals come from the same locations. And one of the criteria is we want to go to the most remote place on the planet that we can possibly go. It needs to look like the moon, really surprise people that are in the adventure world. And that's a tall order. You know, it's a very tall order when you take into account that we're also going to be bringing these folks from the ad agency with us. If the assignment was take 3 months, take 3 of the greatest athletes on the planet and get yourself to a wild location, no problem, we can do it. But we needed to find a location that was exotic, but also where it was accessible. We could actually get ourselves to the location. The director of marketing at Polar Tech at the time was Alan Coney, one of the great clients of my career, very creative individual that was very open-minded about how we approached this. And in the end, Josh Marianelli in my office, who runs many of our productions, came to the conclusion, along with myself, that Patagonia, Argentina, Bariloche, was really our location for shooting. It was the place that we would go. So here's the hero still image shot on the Nikon D800. Here's the hero ski image. And the concept was, you know, new territory. This fabric was new territory. It allowed you to breathe when you're outdoors being active. And here's our glacial travel spot. Now, what was interesting about this project is that the ad agency, you know, they were used to spending automotive-style dollars, and they were really stuck in old ways. They were convinced that we needed to use medium-format digital cameras and that we needed to bring ARRI cameras or even shoot film or bring the Red Epic camera. And at the time, I believe that was still the Red 1 camera. And so the reality was we had to really, my job became selling them on the idea that we definitely do not need to bring big, bulky, clunky cameras. Using the D800 was going to be the way to do it. The reality is we brought along, I sold them on the idea of shooting exclusively on the D800, and that really allowed me to shoot 36 megapixel high-resolution images, and then we could toggle into video mode and shoot video. Full HD video. So I'm seeing in the chat that there's a lot of folks are having some challenges watching the video. So I'm just going to give you a 30-second taste of the video captured in the same environments. And then if you want to watch the video in its entirety, you can certainly, again, visit CoreyRich.com, and you can see the work that we did for Polar Tech in Argentina. But I just want you to get a taste of how bringing these cameras to remote locations really allowed us to make shots and capture content that otherwise would have been impossible. This behind-the-scenes photograph really speaks to what I'm describing. Here we are in Bariloche, Argentina, way up on a cold ridgeline, ice and snow covered. And you can see Dane Henry, who was DPing the video on this project, and one of the Venegas brothers, our athletes, standing next to Dane on this rock spire. And we brought a custom-made aluminum jib arm, 15-foot jib arm, up to the ridgeline, hauled it up on top of this tower, and mounted a Nikon D800 on the end of this jib arm. This would not have been possible with the same size crew and the same size budget had we been hauling along larger cameras. For example, had we been shooting on the Red Epic camera, and that's assuming it was available, you know, that came later, we would have been running out of battery power. We would have had issues with getting a heavy camera on the end of this jib. We would have needed more ballast. It would have required more people to get the camera up there. And so don't get me wrong, it's an amazing camera, but this small form factor camera, the D800, allowed us to capture content that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. The funniest story behind this photograph is while we were in Argentina, I posted this photograph on Facebook, and one of my colleagues, Bill Frakes, fellow Nikon ambassador, legend in the sports photography world. Bill must have been online at the moment I posted. and his comment was, nice placement of the small HD monitor. Now that's the thing mounted in the cold shoe or the hot shoe of the camera. And usually what you use that monitor for is so that you can actually see what's happening through the lens. But it was so cold that morning that the HDMI cable, the long one that ran all the way back to Dane, it just in the frigid temperature stopped working. So that Bill said, nice placement of the small HD monitor. Were you using Nikon binoculars to monitor your camera? Which is, that's actually quite funny. He's right. That's not the normal position, 15 feet from the camera operator, the jib operator. So let's watch 30 seconds or 60 seconds of the video, and then after we watch that, we'll dive right into questions. And here we go. Here's the video. So that might have been a little jittery, but I think what you saw was visually some real overlap between the still photography and the video content that we were able to capture. Again, you can visit my website, coryrich.com, and view the final edited version. It's worth mentioning, by the way, that that cut was just something that we did in the field so that the ad agency and our client could get a feel for what kind of footage we were capturing. Again, that speaks to working with HDSLR video footage in the field on a laptop allowed us to just do a sizzle cut, really, so that everyone could feel comfortable. So I know we're about to switch to questions, and I'm going to, I'd wanted to tell a few more stories, but I think the Q&A is valuable. So I'm going to race through some slides here and skip the storytelling. So Sai, when you're ready to start asking questions, I'll have some still images in the background. Sorry guys, this is from the story dedicated that we did to launch the Nikon D4S, and again, I've written a lot about this on the blog, but let's jump into question and answer.
Absolutely, Corey. Hey, thanks a lot for the presentation. It was visually stunning, and yeah, so I hope our audience enjoyed it too. So I'm getting some questions in already. So if folks, if you want to put in your questions in the box, then feel free to do so, and we'll get through as many as time permits. So I have a few questions. I'm going to jump into the first one, Corey. All right, and then you can take them, and we can go back and forth. Okay. I think the first one was from Philip, and how would you group videos and still shots with a fade effect between the two?
That's an interesting question, and I think what the question really boils down to is there a way to combine still photography and video in a final edited piece? And the answer is yes, there is, and I think folks like Ken Burns and documentary films have for a long time combined still photography and video. And I say this, I know folks disagree sometimes on this one. I'm a firm believer that if you're trying to shoot a film, shoot video. It's more compelling, stick with video, unless you have to lean on still photography to help tell a backstory. By the way, I'm just going to be cycling through some of my images in the background so that everyone's not staring at a screen that just says Q&A in white. But I'm a really firm believer that commit to, are you shooting video or are you shooting still photography? I'm very, very rarely impressed or moved when folks try to combine the two. And there's examples of me combining the two on my website. And I'm being really honest when I say I think they're the weakest projects that I have in the motion section. I would encourage those that are interested in trying to combine still photography and video into a single timeline. My good friend Josh Lowell, who I mentioned earlier in the presentation, who I shot the El Capitan project for, Josh Lowell from Big Up Productions, and Peter Mortimer and Nick Rosen from Sender Films. They just released a film, kind of the authoritative documentary film on Yosemite Valley rock climbing, and it's called Valley Uprising. And it would be worth checking that out. I'm not sure if you can buy it yet on iTunes, but it will be coming soon. And they did an amazing, tremendous job combining video with still photography. But they were using the still photography because it was historical content. And they made the still photographs, they animated the still photographs in ways that made them more compelling than just having that Ken Burns effect on your computer where you're slowly moving across a still image. So that's my opinion. You know, again, people will prove me wrong, and I'm sure there are many, many fantastic projects that combine the two, but I'm kind of a purist in that sense. Either shoot a picture story for print or to accompany a written article on the web, or go out and shoot a motion spot. I think you're going to do a better job moving people that way.
Cool. Cody, so I think you showed a couple of places where, especially while shooting the Y, how you use remotely pilot vehicles. So how were you able to monitor the video recording when using a remotely piloted vehicle?
That's a great question. Yeah, using the drones, or remote control helicopter for Y, it really was our first time. I mean, I don't want to say, we were a bit of pioneers in that sense. To fly that heavy a camera on a RC helicopter was way outside of our league, and there weren't a lot of folks doing it. In fact, we weren't even sure that we could fly. We weren't even sure it could handle the weight of the camera and the lens, the D4 lens and camera combo. But it was so new to us, and the technology was so limiting, and we were working with the prototype camera. We didn't even know what the connection would be to see image out of camera, that we actually could not see what the camera was seeing. It was a lot of guesstimating. We shot on a really wide lens. I think we were mostly 16 to 35 or 17 to 35. So we were all the way, at 17 or at 16 at 5.6, and we would just point it in the general direction and do 2 or 3 passes, because we only had 2 or 3 minutes of flight time each time we put that thing up in the air. And we ended up capturing a couple of really spectacular shots along the way. And I attribute that to the whole team, including the athletes, just really buying into what we were doing and their willingness to perform at the moment and repeat situations quickly. Today, we've come a long way. Today, when we're flying an RC helicopter, we're usually using the free-fly heavy lifter octocopter, and we have a Movi M10 or M5 attached to the bottom, and we're monitoring full-time what the camera is seeing, and we can control where the camera is pointing, so we get infinitely more usable content. I mean, really, the entire flight becomes usable. But that's just the evolution of technology. It's, that's what we had available to us at the time, and now 5 or 6 years later, we're in a whole other world. Now we're bringing drones on almost every job, and well, not every job, but when it makes sense. And we're far more productive and effective with seeing what the camera is seeing using a Paralinks system. That's our downlink.
Cool. Thank you, Corey. The next one's from Loran, and this is more about networking and how to get contacts, because she's a budding photographer. She's studying photography right now. So the question says, so I'm studying photography and have realized how important connections are in the field, and I was wondering, how have you made connections with people you work with now in the field, athletes,
Sure.
Other photographers, so.
Sure. Well, and I really believe this, and for those that are listening that are students or changing careers and are trying to break into the professional photography or filmmaking world, always remember that content is king. Content is paramount. If you have great photos, if you've shot great videos, everything else will fall into place. And I promise that I've never met a talented photographer that has 3 critical ingredients. You need to be willing to work super hard. That's called passion. You need some raw talent, and it helps if you're a good guy and you're not a jerk. Those 3 ingredients, and you put some real time and effort into it. You're funding your own projects. When you start creating great work, everything else falls into place, and it's never been easier for the rest of it to fall into place. And what I mean by that is, today, if you're creating great work and you're publishing it via the web, we have social media tools like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, blogs. You can create your own blog. People notice great content. When great content is published, it gets a lot of views and it gets passed around. And when that happens, the people that need to know your work will call you. I mean, I can say I've spent very limited time in my entire career going out and quote-unquote networking. I really live and die by this philosophy that I try to spend my time doing the things that I care most about and enjoy most, which is the creative process, and then I try to share that content. And I think when it comes to athletes, I've spent a lot of time hanging out at cliffs, making pictures, and you just end up rubbing elbows with the great climbers, for example. That's really early in my career. And I don't care what it is you're photographing. If you love photographing horses or kids, put your time and energy into making great pictures, and you have to be your harshest critic. You have to be honest with yourself. Are your pictures as good, not as good, or better than what you see in the marketplace? And if they're better, everything else will fall into place. Don't get distracted by writing business plans. Figure out a way to spend your time being creative and making awesome content, and the rest will fall into place.
Perfect. I think just to piggyback to that, Cody, I think there was also a question about, as a beginner, how did you get your work out there and noticed, right? So you were just talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I sort of answered that question. Times have changed. The advice that I was given in college was work for a newspaper and get an internship at a newspaper. There's one of the greats in the photography world today is a guy by the name of Rich Clarkson. And Rich has been a real mentor to me over the years. Rich runs a company in Denver, Colorado called Clarkson Creative, and it has a team of photographers, young, talented photographers that work for Rich. But over his career, Rich is now in his 70s. He's led a very decorated career, both as a photographer but also as a director of photography and editor, from running the National Geographic photo department to shooting for Sports Illustrated and everything in between. So at 70 some odd years old, Rich has been there, done that, seen everything. When I just had the opportunity to spend a few days with Rich in Jackson, Wyoming, we were hosting a workshop, the Adventure Photography Workshop. That's the Photography Summit Series, or Photography at the Summit Series. And during the last day of the workshop, we did a roundtable discussion where all of the students, the 30-plus participants, sat in the audience and could ask any question of the faculty, and it was a really great faculty. And someone asked this exact question. It's, how do you get your work out there today? What does the future of photography look like? And Rich gave an incredibly elegant answer, and he said, I'm tired of hearing people tell me that journalism is dying and newspapers are dying and it's the end of photojournalism and storytelling as we know it. He said, and I'll use the two letters, he said, that's BS. He said, it's the brightest time in the history of the world for storytelling, whether that's still photography or filmmaking. And the reason is we have this thing called the internet. We're not dependent on magazines. We're not dependent on record labels. We're not dependent on movie houses to publish our content. We can do it on our own, and we can target our audiences. And that's how you do it. It comes down to social media. And he made a really good point that those folks listening right now that are in college or high school or junior high school, you are creating the future. We don't even know what the delivery mechanism of the future is or what that business model will look like. And that's an exciting time. For many years, it was print magazines, and it was the movie theater and television. All of that's changing, and it's changing because of the ability to publish online and communicate with targeted audience, real time, without the vetting of an editor or a publisher. So that's pretty exciting. That's how you get it out there, is with the web.
Cool. All right, Cody, I think we have time for one last question, and then maybe you could give our audience your Twitter handle so they can, ping you on Twitter, because there's a lot of questions, and they're really good questions. And
Sure.
Yeah.
In fact, let me talk about our presence on the web. So my website is coryrich.com, and we have a blog that's very active. My team and I put a lot of time into sharing latest work, writing essays, educational information, technical information. And one of the categories on our blog is called Ask Cory, and we try to, on a weekly basis, take a question that comes in, and we don't care where it comes from. You can send it to info@CoreyRich. You can post it on my Facebook page, which is Corey Rich Productions. You can post it on our Google Plus page. You can send it to us via Twitter, and all of those social media handles and links are on our blog. But send your questions, and once a week I'm trying to answer an interesting question and certainly back read those Ask Coreys. We're doing tech tips on a weekly basis, video tech tips on how an image was shot. So lots of great information. I love sharing. I always say that if I weren't a photographer, filmmaker, I'd be a teacher, because there were certainly some very special teachers in my life that helped allow me to do what I'm doing today by sharing. So I would encourage everyone to share, really embrace the world that we're living in today, that we have the tools available to us that allow us to really express our creativity. And that's a pretty exciting time to be in. Get out there and have fun, and would love to hear from you with questions. Thanks for listening.
Perfect. All right. I think folks know where to get you, and obviously you have a lot of digital presence, so that's great. So again, we're out of time, so unfortunately we have to end the webinar here. But I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us. I know people from different parts of the world are joining us. In some cases, it's late after 12 in the night. So really appreciate all your all you guys showing up. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you at the next series.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining in.